All Stations, the Transport Podcast. I'm Christian Wommer, an author and journalist who has covered transport for the past 30 years. In every episode, we try to keep you up to date with the most engaging news stories, policy developments, and interviews in the transport world. And with me is my usual co-presenter, Mark Walker, who has spent decades looking at transport policies and legislation. So, Mark, what have we got on today?
Hello, Christian, and hello to our listeners. Later on in this episode, we'll be taking another look at your new book, Fast Track, the Story of High Speed Rail, because only a few days ago it was launched, and we have a live recording of the very interesting and engaging launch event which took place in London. We'll also be having a look at some of the changes that are emerging from the new UK government in relation to transport policy and appointments of personnel since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom 2 weeks ago.
Right, well, Mark, let's start with that, shall we? And a bit of a surprise, maybe, that we didn't get a new Transport Secretary. I thought that was kind of on the cards. But Louise Haigh, who obviously was the Transport Secretary before she was sacked, effectively has been promoted to one of the top jobs in the cabinet, one in the cabinet office. So I think the decision was that Heidi Alexander had been doing a reasonable job. Let's keep her.
Yes, Christian, you're absolutely right about Louise Haigh coming back into the government in a very senior role. Louise Haigh is the first Secretary of State, a title that used to exist in the past in the British government, but has been reinvented for Louise Haigh. But Louise Haigh will head up a new government department called the Office for the Prime Minister and Cabinet, which assumes the functions that used to be performed by the Cabinet Office, but also includes the AI task force, supported by a prime ministerial advisor on AI. And of course, this will complement the establishment of Number 10 in the North, which was an organisation set up with great fanfare by our new Prime Minister to ensure the oversight of the devolution process, local economic growth, including the development of the government's big house building programme, and local economic growth policy, hitherto the responsibility of the Treasury. So some big changes here to the machinery of government.
That's a very big job for her, isn't it? That's a key job at the centre of government. So much more senior than being a mere Secretary for Transport.
Yes, and as you rightly point out, Heidi Alexander, unlike some of the people who had been appointed to senior roles under the previous Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, passed the test of the new administration and has remained in post at the Department for Transport with essentially the same responsibilities, as has Lord Peter Hendy, the Minister of State responsible for rail, whom, of course, we've interviewed previously on this very podcast.
I can hear the sighs of relief in the rail industry that Peter Hendy has survived because, clearly his experience means that he knows what he's doing and he's a steady hand on the tiller at a time when, there are major upheavals in the industry.
Well, he's also got the really current responsibility for a major piece of legislation, the Railways Bill, which is right in the centre of his duties, being at the critical committee stage of its consideration by the House of Lords, which, of course, is the House of Parliament that Lord Peter Hendy sits in. So he's got to see that bill through its committee stage in the autumn and then its final stages before becoming legislation towards the end of 2026. But interestingly, because of the change of government focus, as we kind of predicted in the previous episode of Calling All Stations, we might see some changes to the bill itself, the actual wording of the bill, to reflect the higher priority given to devolution by the new administration led by Andy Burnham, because the government published on the 31st of July a statement about devolution, which attracted quite a lot of national media attention because of the possibility of changing the way that local government is funded, particularly the big mayoral authorities, which will be having access in the future to income tax revenue rather than receiving
It's not all
grants.
it's
Some,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, and all the formula and the detail has got to be sorted out. But what was attracted less attention, but which will be of interest to listeners to Calling All Stations, was what this document said about transport. Because it said, this is the government speaking, reforms to our skills and employment support systems will be complemented by giving local leaders greater power to shape their places through control over local transport, housing, innovation, local energy, and cultural investment. In respect of transport, this is the important bit for us, we will support mayors to take public control of buses more rapidly and implement fully integrated ticketing systems alongside our work with local leaders to support active travel options. That means walking and cycling to you and me. It also says we will give local leaders more control over commuter rail services, with the most established mayors working in much deeper partnership with Great British Railways. As we introduce...
So what does this mean in English then, Mark? Do you think that it means there might be more money for railway schemes, that they'll be able to divert more money, or conversely, will they divert money away from railway schemes because they have more power?
Well, there is a kind of assumption that as you have more devolution, mayors will be so enlightened that they will always want to put more money into public transport. But of course,
reform mayors.
With devolution comes choice, and yes, it doesn't automatically follow that people in these positions of power would share the values of what you might call the sustainable transport community. But let me just finish this point because it answers your question about investment. So it goes on to say, as we introduce new accountability arrangements, we will also remove the need for government approval of locally funded transport schemes for places with integrated settlements, except those that interact with the national network. We will immediately raise the approval threshold to £500 million and work with mayors to replace the concept of retained schemes with local transport infrastructure partnerships. We will also reform our approach to working in partnership with the most strategically significant or complex local projects, drawing on the experience of delivering the Elizabeth line. So what I think that means in plain English is it should be easier for schemes such as the much longed for mass transit scheme for West Yorkshire to sort of at least get out of the starting blocks on the basis of local approval, local authority, and local access to funding. I think that's what it's intended to mean. And it also is designed to show, coming back to the earlier point, that locally elected leaders will have more say over the level of services operated and delivered by Great British Railways to regional authorities areas in England. Now, that comes back to something we discussed in an earlier episode about whether the present Railways Bill is adequate to meet those expectations, or whether in fact the government is now going to have to amend its own bill in the House of Lords to enable these kind of devolution powers to come into existence. I hope that makes some sense.
Yes, but
quite complicated.
Interesting enough, there's a key point there. It said it will devolve things to people, to local authorities that have an integrated policy already. So I somewhat suspect that's a way of ensuring that funds don't go to local authorities that are completely opposed to kind of boosting public transport or railways,
Well,
and
it says
spend it all on.
it says integrated settlements. So I think
Yes,
that's to do with the way that these authorities are funded.
right.
And there are various levels of maturity of devolved local mayoral authorities in England. So essentially, the more mature your authority is, if it becomes something called an established mayoral authority, you get more power and more autonomy when it comes to the money essentially being handed to you and you being told to get on with it, and
Right.
do the things that you want to do. And that's not just in transport, that's across their range of responsibilities. But this is very much written in governmentese, and so you do have to kind of delve into it a bit to try and understand the subtleties and what this will mean in a practical sense. Listeners might recall that when we looked at the government's integrated strategy, transport strategy for England, we commented on the fact that the delivery system for that strategy would be these mayoral combined authorities rather than top-down arrangements being dictated by the centre. But that then brings us back to that very point you raised, Christian, about what if locally elected leaders have different priorities and they don't like buses quite so much, but they want to build some more roads and have free
Yeah.
car parking and
Yeah.
dual carriageways and
Yes.
so on. So this becomes a bit more of a challenge to see delivered locally, as well as Peter Hendy and Heidi Alexander staying put in the Department for Transport. So has Simon Lightwood, but he is now a minister in both the Department for Transport and the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. And it seems it's an inference here. I think we're drawing. We don't know for certain, but it looks like by being Minister for Local Transport in both departments, he will have a bigger say in coordinating housing developments with transport policy delivery at a local level and transport funding at a local level. This is something the government aspired to do right back in 2024, but they seem to have had trouble delivering the integration between housing development and transport investment. So there seems to be a suggestion here that Mr. Lightwood's role will be to bring those two activities closer together.
Well, that's slightly redolent of 1997 when we had this mega department under John Prescott, a much more powerful figure than Simon Lightfoot, obviously, but who brought together kind of transport and environment, didn't he?
Yes.
And that was also already the second attempt to do that. There's one in the 80s, I seem to remember, trying to bring together the environment and transport, and somehow it never quite works. But I think it's a very good idea theoretically.
Yeah, and there have been tensions over the decades as to whether
Yes.
transport it should be allied with the environment or whether it should be allied with economic development. And of course,
Yeah.
in fact, it's allied with both. And that's but that sometimes leads to these challenges and contradictions in where the sort of departmental structures go. We should also mention that Keir Mather has stayed on in the Department for Transport, looking after aviation and maritime.
He's
And
the very young guy, isn't he?
he is who took the railways bill through its committee stage in the House of Commons.
Right.
And then with the departure of Lillian Greenwood, who's gone off to the Department for Work and Pensions, we have a completely new person in the Department for Transport. That's Justin Madders, the Member of Parliament for Ellesmere Port and Bromborough, who has become the Minister for Roads. And so he makes up the fifth member of the Transport Ministerial team.
Right. So, out of all this, do we detect any kind of major changes. We've already had one policy implementation, which is that buses are going to go back to maximum of £2 in the new year.
For
And
England outside of London. That's right. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Important to stress that, because London bus fares are pretty high. So is there any other kind of
Well, as well as
immediate
the
changes?
yeah, I think as well as the sense of a direction of travel with the devolution agenda that we discussed, there are clearly some big decisions in this ministerial in tray, which may be a bit problematic for this new administration because they could involve reversals of policy. In that, if you look at at the kind of political direction of travel which is being suggested by Andy Burnham as the UK's new Prime Minister, you have to ask yourself the question, if economic development for those parts of the country away from London is so vitally important for the lifting up of the state of the British economy as a whole, and opportunities and employment and so on, and if the environment remains a very high priority as well, and net zero continues to be an objective of government policy, how can you continue to justify projects like the expansion of airports, notably the third runway at Heathrow that was so vigorously backed by the former Chancellor, or the Lower Thames Crossing motorway in the Thames estuary, which has also been highly controversial. So massive infrastructure projects in the southeast of England, which are designed to boost the economy of the southeast of England even more, when resources might better be allocated to other parts of England or the wider UK.
So Andy Burnham might be against those on two grounds. One, that they're in the south, and two, that they're very expensive mega projects that don't seem to be environmentally sustainable.
Yeah, and of course the previous government tried to wriggle out of the public expenditure aspects by saying, well, the Heathrow runway will be entirely funded by the private sector. And they were also proposing to come up with some kind of private sector funding model for the Lower Thames Crossing, for which loyal listeners will remember there is the need to introduce primary legislation in the form of a highways financing bill, which was announced in the King's Speech earlier this year. But will those really be priorities for a Burnham administration? I have to question, whether that is likely to be the case. Whereas, if we're talking about mega projects, Mr. Burnham has shown great interest in reviving some version of HS2 or a new railway north of Birmingham to connect with Crewe and possibly Manchester, and to link into the Northern Powerhouse rail project, which we know has been dear to his heart for many years. So you might speculate that if scarce resources have to be allocated to a small number of very large projects, would Heathrow and Lower Thames Crossing motorway be the ones that he would want to see taken forward?
Fascinating stuff. And but we probably have to wait till the autumn at least before we know if any of that comes about.
Yeah, I would think so. We've got a budget announced for the 28th of October, and presumably linked to that will be some kind of spending review. We know the tremendous pressures that the British state is under to meet its defence expenditure needs, not least, which caused two significant resignations in the run up to the resignation of Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. So all of those challenges have to be met as well. So while the Burnham administration enjoys its honeymoon, boosted by policies such as the very popular £2 maximum bus fare, you have to wonder how long this honeymoon will actually last.
Well, that's a very good point to draw this discussion to a close. I think just my personal view is that this is exciting, this is interesting. Andy Burnham's got off to a very good start, but the big questions remain.
Listeners might like to know that we're recording this episode of Calling All Stations on Christian's birthday. So happy birthday from me and from all of our many loyal listeners, Christian. Coinciding approximately, Christian, with your birthday was the launch of your latest book, Fast Track, The Extraordinary Story of High Speed Rail, which you and I discussed at some length in the previous edition of Calling All Stations. But your book also had a formal launch at the Owl Bookshop in North London a few days ago, just a short distance away from your home, where your interrogator this time was Andrew Martin, author of a number of railway books, including the very recently published To the Sea by Train. Now, Andrew was in front of a live audience. In fact, the bookshop was packed with your fans and admirers. And Andrew asked a number of different questions from the ones that I did in our earlier discussion. So we've recorded this live content for Calling All Stations podcast, and we hope that listeners will enjoy it. Before Andrew and Christian get into their conversation, we'll hear a few words from Ruth Atkins, who's a senior editor with Penguin Michael Joseph, the publisher of Fast Track.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks to Owl Bookshop for hosting it. And thanks to all of you for coming to toast Fast Track's publication. So Christian Waldemar here, as well as being hailed the high priest of the railway studies by the Literary Review and our most eminent transport journalist by the Spectator, also has the honour of being so readable that never in my whole career at Penguin have I had so many colleagues come up to request an author's book for themselves, for family or friends. That would be a surprise to you to hear, Christian. Yeah, it's impossible to keep your books in the office. We've had the pleasure of publishing Christian's reappraisal and new history of British Rail a couple of years ago. And now he's turning his attention outward to the rise over the last 60 years of high-speed rail. And this is a truly global story. And Christian takes us from Japan's bullet train across the 30,000 miles of new track built in China to the French TGV and high-speed rail initiatives in Europe, Morocco, the Middle East and Asia. Curiously lagging behind, though, on these paths to the future are the United States and Britain's infamous woes with HS2, which have rather left us behind in the race. It's been truly fascinating to read Christian's thorough history and incisive commentary, and I'm so happy that readers now get a chance to discover the surprising insights of high-speed rail for themselves. With us today as well is Andrew Martin, so I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. And I rather think you'll enjoy Christian's upcoming project with us too. But for tonight, it's all about Fast Track. There's copies on sale of both Christian and Andrew's books, so please dig deep and try and sell out those copies tonight. And now I'm delighted to hand you over for what will be a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming along tonight to hear from Christian about his new book, Fast Track. Everything he's publisher said is true. He is the railway laureate of Britain, and he is our leading railway commentator. It's all perfectly straightforward, really. And he does write readable railway books, and I've read most of them probably and reviewed some of them. And by the way, most railway books are not readable. So I take my hat off to him. And I've learned more about railways from Christian Waldemar than from any other single person. But my first question is, Christian, I think you have a rather fascinatingly cosmopolitan background. Can you let us know when and how you first got interested in railways?
Yes, I can. And it involves actually talking about my background, because I come from a very strange kind of family structure which is that my father. I'll stand up because it might help.
Should we both stand up?
Yeah. My father was Russian and my mother was Swedish, and I was born out of wedlock. This is relevant. I'll get to the point of it. Because I have actually written a book about it, which I will eventually, hopefully, publish at one
Well,
day.
tell us the title now.
Well, I don't know what the title. Well, Boris was the name of my father, and it might be
Perhaps
Boris.
just another title.
Yes, because unfortunately somebody else took that. Absolutely. So anyway, Boris was a bit of a ladies' man and was married to a woman called Marisa and lived in a block of flats in Chiswick. And my mother came over the North Sea in 1940. Now that is weird in itself. She was aged 34 and she was helping her sister, who also lived in the same block of flats. And lo and behold, my mother was very beautiful and there was a swimming pool there, and Boris met her around the swimming pool and started having an affair with her. And actually produced, first of all, my elder brother, who's 4 years older than me, and then me in 1949. And the odd thing is, I never lived with my father, but he used to come around every day, and I didn't know he was my father. He was always presented as my mother's boyfriend or my stepfather or whatever. He was never presented as actually my father. But he treated me absolutely. Russians are actually very good dads sometimes, and he treated me with kind of enormous love and would come around every day. And the thing that he did on a Sunday was, I finally got to trains. The thing he did on a Sunday was to take me to Paddington Station, where in those days you could drive down the middle of it, right?
Yeah.
Where the
Taxi
taxi
rank.
Yeah, and he ignored. My father was one who slightly ignored the rules, and something I have inherited much too. But chagrin of my wife. And so we used to drive down the middle, and I used to pop out and take the numbers of the kings and the kings and the kings and the other kind of locomotives, and then we'd go off and have Sunday dinner. And that was my sort of first experience.
I'm sorry I've missed this, but where did your mother come from when she came?
My mother came from Stockholm, across the sea in 1930.
Russian, and your mother is
Swedish. And
how come you can speak fluent French then?
Yeah, because they sent me to the French lycée, which was the obvious thing to do. I don't know why. Well, actually, because my half brother, who is much older than me, had gone to the lycée some 20 years before. It's a very long. I mean, it's a great book.
It's going to be a good book.
It's going to be a good book. But so I fell in love with railways because my dad would take me to watch them, and then and then I kind of grew up after.
Okay. That's better than my backstory, which is buying platform tickets for tuppence at York Station. But let's come to high-speed rail. And I want to ask you, first of all, about the motivation behind the different countries that had high-speed rail. So, strictly concerned here with the why. Why did they do it? Let's start with Japan, the first one, which launched the Shinkansen, is that correct?
Shinkansen.
In time for the 1964 Olympics. Why in Japan?
Right. There are several reasons. I mean, first of all, they had a very crowded line between Tokyo and Osaka. And they'd actually, even before the Second World War, had thought, we need to do something about this. We need to expand capacity on this line. And they'd actually developed vague plans for a kind of second railway there. And then after the war, they really wanted to show that they had peaceful intent and that they got rid of their military regime of the war, and they wanted to then show the world for the Olympics. And the Olympics, by the way, sporting events come through my book.
Yes, I know. It's a regular theme.
I mean, it's a regular theme. Including
so it was partly a PR thing.
Yes.
Right from the start.
Absolutely, definitely. They wanted to show that Japan not only had peaceful intent, but had modern kind of was modernizing and wanted this fantastic railway to show, and also needs. This was the most crowded. I mean, if anybody's been to Japan, you'll know that the 500 kilometers between Tokyo and Osaka is absolutely jam-packed with housing and little towns and whatever. It's where everybody in Japan lived. So it was the perfect solution.
But it's kind of long, thin country thing. So it suits
Yes.
high-speed rail,
Yes.
unlike some other countries. Right. And then let's come to Spain. Now, I think it's pretty clear from your book that Spain, it's a no-brainer, really. It was a kind of grid in Spain to hold the country together. Is that correct?
Spain gets the prize as really the surprise of the book in a way, because Spain was, economically quite backward, a kind of backwater of Europe. It had been held back by the dictatorship until the late 70s, and it had a terrible railway system. It really had kind of it had nobody had invested in it. And then almost by mistake, again, they have an event, the Seville exhibition of 1992. And they decide, we need a better transport system to get people to the Seville, which is some 300-400 miles from Madrid. And so they build this line, and they build it very efficiently. They build it in kind of 3 or 4 years.
Can you explain in a sentence or two how they managed to do it so quickly and efficiently?
I think because they kept it simple. They used local contractors. Both political parties were all in favour.
Everyone was in favour of it.
Everyone was in favour. They set out the money. Here's the money to do it. Unlike in this country, which I'm sure we'll come to. Here's the money to do it. And they did it kind of amazingly efficient. And then they thought, this is a great idea. This is something that we could use to unify the country. So they, over the next 25, 30 years, built a network of nearly 4,000 kilometers, linking nearly all the major regional cities. I mean, they have Madrid in the middle and not much around it, and then all the kind of other places. So it's absolutely perfect for a system that emanates out of Madrid, kind of in all directions.
So we could say that it was necessary in Spain. And I think we can say it's necessary in China, because of the sheer scale of the economic expansion that was going on.
Well, that's an interesting point, because you could have alternatives. I mean, remember, America is a similar size, it's smaller to China, and they did actually have an idea for high-speed rail in the 1960s under Lyndon Johnson. And it didn't happen.
No.
And China also, it might not have happened. They had some ideas for high-speed rail. They built the first line. Then they had a terrible accident in 2011. And there was kind of debate about, should we be doing this? Is this let's have maybe maglev, or let's maybe just build highways. Do we really need a railway? And, there was one guy, Mr. Liu Jing, who
are in jail.
Who's now in jail. Yes, that's unfortunate. And he's still in jail. He didn't get
a typical denouement for public life in China.
Well, he didn't. Yes, he pocketed a few million. But,
so he was guilty, was he?
Well, my friends in China, some of whom are here, said to me that actually they thought that 4 million was a bit kind of cheap. Actually, that he might have just been kind of fell out with the wrong people. But anyway, he ended up in jail. But he developed the first high-speed lines, and then it kind of took off from there.
So it was by the force of his personality?
Partly initially, but then the Chinese realized this is a way of holding the country together as well, because and rewarding the people for all the forbearance and being loyal to the Chinese regime and whatever. And one of the things they can have is a wonderful railway that is reasonably cheap, and they can go and see their parents kind of very cheaply. And when it's the Chinese holidays, everybody actually piles out.
It's a social service.
It's a social service as well as a commercial service. So obviously Beijing to Shanghai is a commercial railway that makes an enormous amount of profit. But then they started building railways to smaller towns that will probably never pay their way in terms of high speed. And some of them have freight on them as well, and some of them have kind of sometimes share a bit of it with slower train. But basically, they realised this is something we can do for the people.
Yeah.
And brilliantly, they build it on stilts, right? And one of the reasons why they build it on stilts is so they don't piss off the local peasants and farmers. Absolutely. So they just go underneath it, right? And of course, it's.
But then again, in China, can the peasants object? Could they have?
I think
if
they
they
could.
didn't
Make,
do it on
I think one misunderstands China if you think.
It's not that the government can do absolutely what it wants.
Yeah, it can't. They have to kind of occasionally bow to public opinion, and if they kind of really angered all the local farmers in a particular area, it would cause them trouble. So it's not a democracy, but it's also not kind of 100% kind of dictatorship.
Yeah, let's come on to France. It's a slightly more subtle motivation. Is it not just a question of style in French? You know, they want a train that looks great.
Is that
an element of it? I mean, it's a big country, of course. But was it really required in France?
Again,
after Japan?
Part of the pattern of this, and Spain was an exception, but part of the pattern is what is your absolutely busiest railway line, and can it cope with the demand placed upon it? And so for Japan, obviously it was Tokyo Osaka, and that was like kind of, really full up the existing line. And similarly in France, the Paris-Lyon line was absolutely jam-packed, and it had freight on it, and it was kind of incredibly well used. And so they thought, okay, let's go for this. But here the story gets interesting, because as I point out in the book, there was a period of time when actually the technology of high-speed rail might not have taken off. It took off in Japan early, and then both in France and in Germany, and to some extent in Japan and China. There was this alternative maglev technology.
That's that goes to the
that never quite happened, right? And but for a while the French were going to build a line from the center of Paris to the airport, and then there was going to build one between Paris and Orléans, and it was they had some test tracks that ran at 400 kilometers an hour, and it was maglev. Well, actually, the French was. I've made a mistake in the book. I can't. Actually, I've called Aérotrain maglev, but it wasn't maglev because it elevated with compressed air like the hovercraft.
Was it not related to maglev then?
No, so it's lev, but not mag. Yes. But I don't tell anybody. Don't tell my publisher. Oh, she's here. But actually, so it's lev. But then the Germans actually built something that was maglev, and they were going to, they call it Transrapid, and they were going to run a line between Berlin and Hamburg. And then they realized that actually this lev or maglev business actually is very expensive to operate.
Who was the guy in France who pioneered the?
He was called Bazin.
He comes across as a tragic figure.
He was Mr. Bazin. He was a very tragic figure.
Did he die as a result of the failure?
I think he did. Yes, he died in his early 60s. He promoted this idea for kind of 20 years. There's probably a book to be done about it. Yeah, don't nick the idea, Andrew.
But the French did power cars. Like quasi locomotives at the head of the train.
Yes.
Whereas the Japanese had done
on their TGV. Yes.
On the TGV. Whereas the Japanese had done electrical multiple units with the power distributed.
Yes.
And that's right. What's the logic of that?
They've actually, I think, now reverted to the.
It's now EMUs, are they?
It was a bad idea. Big locomotives in the front. It actually.
So the power is distributed along.
Now the power is distributed in the same way.
Right.
So look. I'm not great on technology. Yeah, I did understand the technology boundary or whatever, and I write a bit about it. But this book is not about
than me.
This book is not about the technology. This book is about the whole excitement of the fact that railways have been rescued from their 19th century.
We're going to come on to the glamour of high-speed train. Right. Germany. What's their motivation? Was it to keep up with France?
Yes, it was. There was a big competition between the French and the Germans.
So was that basically the bottom line with them? It
was Siemens in Germany, also in France. Big competition, and who has the fastest train, and they kind of had competitions about who was kind of winning the fastest train kind of thing. But the Germans went for a different model. So whereas in France, the LGV, the Ligne à grande vitesse, are all completely separate, although they in near the big towns like they share a line. But once they're out in the countryside, they're on their own, nothing else. They did have postal services on the lines, but they still ran at high speed. And then in Germany, they decided, oh, it's not going to quite work like that. We're going to have bits where we upgrade the line and bits where we have new line. And also we're going to, a big mistake, we're going to allow freight on...
High-speed freight?
Not high-speed freight. No, that's the issue. You can't get freight at kind of 300 kilometers an hour. So then they build the lines for taking freight, and that costs a lot of money, and it's a bad idea, right? So they have this kind of slightly muddled system.
Is it a bit of a mess then, the IC?
It is a bit of a mess, the IC. It's not a kind of a kind of clean, totally independent. So it's not a motorway on rails.
Just to stick with slightly technical things for a minute. What's the trade-off between speed and capacity? I can never get my head around that. Is Italy, you say, is about capacity?
All these new railways are about capacity, really. And if you go fast, you require fewer units, and to some extent.
You said in the book that speed kills off capacity.
Yeah, but only if you go too fast, and then the distance between the trains kind of gets much bigger and bigger, right? It grows exponentially. But so 300 kilometers an hour is a great kind of speed to go at. Now the Chinese and others are trying for 400, and they might get there, but it will mean that unless you get better brakes, and the Chinese are developing some fantastic brakes. So if you get better brakes, then you can stop. But basically, it takes 2 miles to stop a train going at full speed.
Because the train came off the tracks in France, didn't it? And it took half an hour to stop or something.
Well, it bumped off, but it didn't topple over. As long as they don't topple over, it's kind of okay. Yeah.
We come on to the two basket cases, as you call it. The first of which is a railway in California between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And this is ongoing as a project, is it? Or is it stalled?
Well, it's not Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's Merced, population 50,000.
Where's that?
And Bakersfield, population 500,000. So in the middle of the Central Valley. So they're about 180 miles apart or something. And they've managed to build that bit of line sort of.
Those two places near the places I just mentioned?
They're both about 100 miles away from either of them, through mountains and
what's that railway called?
It's called the California High Speed Rail Project, and it almost makes the HS2 look competent. Not quite, but it's kind of almost worse because there seems to be no way they haven't worked out ways to get to either San Francisco or to Los Angeles. And if they end up with a railway between Merced and Bakersfield, it's going to be even more of a white elephant than our
the Aston
to Acton shuttle, which is the HS2, which is the name I've given it. So it's also like HS2. It started at $30 billion, and now it's got to $100 billion.
This is the projected figure for when it's got.
But just no, it's just Merced to Bakersfield. I'm afraid, it's.
So even disaster between these two obscure places, yes, that will be 100 billion.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so familiar, isn't it? It's kind of, but then
we come on to the cultural similarities between that and our own basket case, which you outline in the book. A certain resistance to the state in Britain and America. Land acquisition is hard. A high value put on private property. Can we just duck back to France a minute? Somebody says that quoted in your book says that the hallmark or the signifier of the TGV lines or the LGV is the push tractors of the farmers alongside it, because they've sold off their bit of land for the road at a great cost. Well, was
Great expense, but
it was a great expense. Did the French government lean on these people, or did they just pay them so much more?
Yeah.
Or was the land value cheaper to begin with?
Well, it was cheap. I mean, look, France is a big country, and but partly no, they just paid these. They overpaid for it, and just for just pay 3 or 4 times.
Just to anticipate about Britain, why couldn't we do that? Can we do that in Britain?
You have to go and ask in Whitehall. I don't know. I mean, I think that we're actually more constrained. I think that the Treasury would say, "Oh, we can't do that. Oh no,
Make it too
expensive.
expensive.
It makes it too expensive." When in fact it would make it cheaper, and that isn't the only problem with it. But the as you said, you hit upon the right kind of point. The similarity, there's a big difference between the United Kingdom and the United States, is that we have a functioning railway system across most of the country, and they don't. But the similarities are this kind of, refusal to just allow something like this to happen.
A suspicion of the state.
Fund it, yes, exactly. To fund it with enough money right from the get-go and kind of ensure that it kind of happens. And neither the United States nor the United Kingdom have managed to do that. And these are 2 projects in parallel. It'll be great to actually do a film about these 2 projects, to do them in parallel.
Like a slow bicycle race.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Well, let's talk about the particular problems that have beset the HS2. I mean, HS1 was quite successful, wasn't it, in the end, and has been deemed a success, like most high-speed railways that have been built. And so that, in a way, encouraged people to think there ought to be an HS2. So that's the initial.
Yes, it was also it was punted for a long time by Andrew Adonis, who was a rail minister and then transport secretary, and it was his baby. It certainly was the idea that we could do this, but it was resisted for a long time. Alistair Darling kind of used to, when he was transport secretary, he used to rejoice in the fact that we're not having any of this stuff.
He was the transport secretary at the time that it was initiated, wasn't he? And he commissioned...
No, he wasn't.
Oh, sorry.
No, Andrew Adonis was.
Okay, but there was always political resistance to it, wasn't
Yes, yes, very much.
And this enormous review or invitations to object were solicited. And there were 50,000...
Yes.
Who solicited those?
Oh, well, this is a daft planning process we have. So in France, they just basically did it, and they set out the line, and they pay off the people who need to be paid off. And if there's any objectors, they basically they go to court, but they kind of chop them out and whatever. It's kind of it's a centralized state.
But this is
whereas we kind of go through this parliamentary process, which is completely insane, which is that we have 2 years of people just bringing objections, and the people deciding this are MPs, and they don't care that it costs 100 million to build a bat tunnel or whatever, because it's not their money.
But is this a throwback to the idea that you have to have an act of parliament to build a railway?
Yes.
So it's a kind of democratization.
Absolutely.
So it's a tribute. It's about the importance of land ownership in Britain, really. You mustn't usurp the rights of the landowner.
That is certainly.
Well, how come it's different in France then? Because in France it's the
stronger
culture of
state.
engineers, isn't it, rather than of landowners?
Stronger state and more direction and a strategy that I think we have never set out a strategy.
Can you think of a way of changing that culture in Britain? Because this needs to be done on so many fronts. Housing as well, isn't it? It's the same.
I'd make a lot of money if I could work out. So I think to be fair, this government has tried to reduce some of the planning kind of constraints, and they've kind of. Do you know what I think the worst thing of the planning system is? Consultation. Consultation just kills off anything, because you have to consult and then consult again, and you have to kind of, yes, you should obviously have some soundings, but you shouldn't have to be constrained.
But it was Hamid who solicited this consultation because he opposed.
Well, there's the line. Isn't
So
it?
there was even more consultation than there needed.
So Andrew, we have ended up with 10-mile tunnels underneath the Chilterns. I mean, can you imagine the Chilterns, these huge alpine-like hills that
You
are
said
kind of-
two pimples or
Yes,
something.
yes. I mean, it's completely insane that we have 10 miles of tunnel underneath. 10 miles gets you through most of the Alps, right? I mean, it's.
And you could have a
absolutely
railway
insane.
line through the Chilterns, which would be rather elegant, just
Yes.
wiggling its way
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
nice views of the Chilterns. But
By the way,
tell us about the Bat Tunnel.
Well, I'll tell you about the Batson, but that the amount of time you're going to get viewed on the when you go from Euston
Is
isn't
nothing.
it's 20% of the time you'll have a view, and 80% you'll be in some sort of tunnel.
Is this
Or
true?
cactus or
Is this not true of high-speed rail in general? That often in Japan it's all with big walls around it.
Sometimes, yeah.
If you go on Eurostar, you made a very good point once in a column about Eurostar. You said you never see the sea
You
once.
never see the
And you said there should have been at least a token view of the
Yes.
sea.
No, I always thought that would have made it a much.
And it's just such a boring. I love Eurostar, but it's a very boring
It is.
view from the window.
It is. But at least you get views of the countryside.
Whereas the TGV down to Marseille is fantastic.
Absolutely. So the Bat Tunnel. I think the Bat Tunnel.
Bat mitigation.
The
it's
Bat,
called.
it says everything about what's wrong with the project, and I use it as an example. There's two examples. I'm using another example, but the Bat Tunnel. So they were worried about the fact that there was a nest of bats, of about 3,000 or 4,000 bats, in a wood, kind of vaguely near the line of the
Where was this
railway.
wood, roughly?
Buckinghamshire somewhere. I think Bucks, I think. And so they said we have to mitigate this. So they dredge up 20 different ways of mitigating this. And Nature England says, no, we're not having any of this. Some of it was just build a couple of hedges, and some of it was kind of having sonar devices to chase off the bats or whatever. And they said, no, we're not having any of this. We want you to build this tunnel, right? And so they build this tunnel, right, which is 1 kilometer long, and there's a kind of covering, which, really could put a bit of corrugated iron on it because it's not kind of structural, but then they have to dig huge holes to hold it together, and it has to build to certain standards. It ends up costing, it's not 100 million, by the way, it's 130 million, right? And there was nobody to say, actually, 130 million will build you a rather good couple of primary schools, and the money would be better spent doing that. So go away, Nature England, and just take us to court if necessary. And we don't even know if this thing will kill any bats, because the bats are very good at kind of devising how to avoid trains, and they fly very fast.
You could build a lot of belfries to accommodate that.
Build anything for it, and I think it's illustrative. I mean, there is another example where they built a bridge that is a very expensive bridge over a farm, what is farm track that hasn't been used as a road for 20 years, and they said, and Buckinghamshire Council again, who are very anti HS2, kind of made them build this very expensive bridge over this over the railway that actually nobody's ever going to use because the road doesn't actually go over this bridge anymore. I mean, it's full of these stories, and this highlights the kind of lack of coherent management of this project.
The HS2 was signed off by Boris Johnson.
Right.
He's the begetter of it, really, in that sense, isn't he? Could we say maybe this is unfair, that this is just the largest of his many vanity projects, like the Boris bus, which I actually love, but which is about to be phased out, apparently. It's in Bratchcombe in somewhere. And then his cable car over the river.
And the airport.
So is this...
Look, far be it from me to defend Boris Johnson. Like, not something that you'll catch me doing, but I mean, yes, he could have killed it off in 2019 or whatever it was when they had a last review for it. But there's a lot of other people who are responsible for it all along.
Who would you
all along
say it was mainly? Adonis?
I think Adonis has to have. There's a guy called Andrew McNaughton, who I have particularly in for because he specified that it had to be a 400 kilometre per hour railway.
Oh,
and we're a very small country, and we're going to
make it the fastest.
They have to make it the fastest. And Boris loved this, of course. So Boris said, let's have the fastest railway, and let's have the best railway, the biggest railway, and and so he kind of he kind of picked up on Norton's kind of bad
There's
idea.
a lot of Andrews involved in this because there's who is the Andrew who opposed it? Who was an
The best MP on it was Andrew Stevenson, that guy.
Oh no, I'm thinking
no.
of maybe it's not that. Anyway,
Oh, sorry, Andrew. Andrew
Andrew Gilligan, who opposed it.
Yes,
and
despite the fact he was in Boris's office.
for totally sensible reasons.
Yes.
it seems to me.
Yes. I have. interviewed
Did
many
you
times.
oppose it right from the start?
I was opposed to it right from the start, and on the grounds that it was unnecessary, went to the wrong places, it was ill thought out, and would turn out to be very expensive.
I did an event about one
I'm
of
very
it.
proud of that. I'm very proud.
No,
2009.
well,
It's an article.
But I think it's I think it's very poignant in a way because some people might apply a criticism of your writing, not about the quality of the writing, but just that you're normally saying, let's spend more on transport.
Yes.
And your mantra is it's not about the cost, it's about the values, because that's your social view of transport, and I agree with it. But in this case, you're saying, no,
It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. And
the bean counters in this case
we're right.
were right.
So there's a piece on my website from the London Review of Books from 2009 that is all about Diwana's, the restaurant in Drummond Street, and how their effect on it, and every time I go
Just
through
got
that,
to be destroyed.
yes.
By the way, my son has a flat overlooking the line into Euston, and he's got beautiful light in his flat because it's just overlooking this big railway cutting. Are they going to build on that railway cutting?
I've got no idea.
This is a personal question.
Right.
And then why is there so much activity way north of Euston? Nowhere near where
And what's
the
more,
tunnel is
that's what,
supposed
they
to be.
block the road, and I cycle through this all the time. They block the road in one way, and then they clear it, and then they block it.
But
There's a
why
wheel
that's
block.
happening?
Well, it's the move. Yes, I have found out. It's the moving of utilities.
Christian, what's the latest figure for the projected final cost when it's completed? And is that for when it's completed between somewhere near the middle of Birmingham and somewhere near the middle of London?
Yes.
Or is it for the
No, it's
because
for
it is
that
going to go to Euston?
It's for that bit. It's for 95 to 103 billion. And that's for just the actor dash and shuttle, and maybe a little bit of little bit extra up towards Hampton.
I suppose so that the kind of apologia in a way for all the people who backed it, and maybe they will eventually in a far distant future be justified, is that it's all stems from the railway romance that you and I probably have and lots of people here have. It comes from, if you grew up in Doncaster near the plant in the interwar period, you'd be climbing up if you're a schoolboy, but climbing up a lamppost to look over the wall and see the A4s of Gresley being shopped out. It is the glamour and romance of trains. And so that's the culprit in a way, isn't it?
Yes, although there's something slightly unromantic about high-speed rail. I mean, there's something exciting about them, and they're modern, and they're kind of expression of speed and kind of wonderment, but they don't quite have the kind of homely feeling of sitting on, as I have done, in a dining car overlooking the Rhine, kind of trundling along at 60 miles an hour. It's not quite that, but it is. Look, which we should end on, because it is exciting that this is a 19th century invention that got, I've written a piece for The Guardian, which will come out tomorrow or the day after, which has actually saved the railways.
Yeah.
I mean, would you agree with that?
Yes. I used to go to a shop in the West End in St Martin's Lane. I think it was called Motor Books. And I went there to write a piece for a column that I used to write for the Evening Standard. And I was talking to the man who managed the shop, and I said, well, it's just a lot of people who are interested in steam trains, isn't it? A kind of slightly satirical note to that. And he said, no, it's about Eurostar. It's about high-speed trains. We have top film stars coming in here. We have famous politicians. I can't tell you who they are because trains have such a bad reputation. But this is the future of railways. And it is, for now, anyway. And it's a shame we've screwed it up into it. But when's the projected completion date for HS2?
I'm not going to be around. I mean,
I'm not going to be around either. But it's possible that in
30,
2040 people will be loving it.
not.
There'll be a statue to Boris Johnson in Euston.
To get to Manchester, it's not going to be until 2045 or something.
Oh, by the way, what's Burnham going to do about taking it up to Manchester?
Well, he'd probably give it the okay, but it won't be until 2045.
With private money.
So, God knows how he'll do it.
Anyway, thank you all for coming. Any? Yes, different. No, come, Doctor.
Here's Christian's final thought from the Departure Lounge.
Well, I've decided that Great British Railways, as a name that I've never liked, should be changed, and that even though it's in the legislation, so it can't be officially changed, I think the railway should trade under the name BritRail, and in line with Britpop or Brit Art, because it represents a revolution in the way that the railways are going to be operated, and I think it should signal the fact that this must be a people's railway in every way, accessible to people through relatively cheap fares, accessible through helping people with disabilities, and accessible for people to work for the new BritRail, because I think it's very important that it creates a career structure for young people to join the railway at the age of 18 or 21 or whatever, and stay there as a career, kind of working their way up. So be gone with any outsourcing and any use of kind of contractors and the like, of as much as possible under the control of BritRail. And I think that it will become a very popular organisation.
Calling All Stations, the Transport Podcast with Christian Walmar, is produced by Cogitamus Limited, a leading provider of public affairs consultancy services in the sector. We do hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, do please consider giving us a 5-star rating with whichever platform you use. Do follow us on social media. You can find Calling All Stations, the Transport Podcast, and Christian Walmar on Blue Sky. You can find Cogitamus Limited on LinkedIn and Instagram.